guys, Matt Allen here. Welcome back to Tacticalbassin. Today we are jumping back into the Buyer's Guides videos. This is at your request. We asked throughout that Buyer's Guide series, what other videos did you want before Christmas got here? And we got a bunch of requests for a jerkbait Buyer's Guide, and that is exactly what I'm gonna do. Today we're talking jerkbaits. I'm gonna keep this simple, just like the other Buyer's Guides. This one, I'm not even going to include rods, reels, line, all that stuff. We will still include it down in the video description, but I'm not going to take the time to walk you through the different jerkbait rods and why we use them. But if you open up that description, you'll find links to the rods we use, budget rods, reels, budget reels, high end, mid-range, low end, so that you can choose the right equipment for you. But in the video itself, we're just talking jerkbaits. I've got a handful of brands here. These are the baits that I took out of my personal jerkbait arsenal. These are the baits that we throw. They are hands down my favorite jerkbaits, fishing through the winter months, all the way around into spring, and then ultimately in fall again. Just phenomenal jerkbaits. There's, I don't know what there is, 100, 200, 300 jerkbaits on the market. There's only a half a dozen or a dozen that we fish with. You really can streamline it. Colors too are really easy to streamline. There's so many color options out there, but if you stay in key categories, you're good. So let's talk baits first, and then we'll come back and talk a little bit about color. We'll start out with deeper baits. This time of year, it's early December. It's a warm day here in California, but it gets cold here at night. It'll be really cold here in a couple weeks. When that happens, those fish tend to get a little bit deeper in the call, and we go to that deep diving jerkbait. So two baits to consider, well really three baits to consider. First one, that Lucky Craft Stacey 90. This one is chewed up, man. It has been through the work. That Stacey 90 gets down deep. It's got a really good diving action, a good dart. Fishes extremely well on that slow fish. Because the jerkbait throughout the year, you change your cadence a lot. When that water's warm, you're really working that bait, ripping it hard. When that water gets cold, you just twitch it and just let it sit there. Twitch, twitch, let it sit. You might let it pause 3 seconds, 5 seconds, 10 seconds between rips. That Stacey is really good for that because when you pull it, it's just got a good kick to it. It's not super aggressive, and it's great for that just slow moving deep water. That's a really good option. Another one almost identical but smaller is that Lucky Craft Pointer 78 Deep Diver. Same profile, a little bit sharper roll when you twitch it, but the biggest thing is that it's smaller profile, a little bit shorter body style. Works really well in lakes that have shad because they're that shorter, taller profile. The minnow itself in real life, shorter and taller. That pointer matches that well. That Stacey works where there's shad, works where you have little silver-side minnows or alewives or anything else, that longer, more slender profile. The last one is going to be the Megabass. Now this is just the standard 110, but it comes in a deep diving version, that 110 plus one, I believe it's what it's called. But that deeper diving version is another killer. The Vision 110 is probably the #1 jerkbait on the market anymore, but they make it in a handful of options, and we throw 3 of them. So the first one is that deep diver, second one is the standard, third one is the Magnum. That's the Vision 110 Magnum. And even the Magnum size is not a giant bait. But that Vision 110, incredibly well balanced. It's got a very small bill on it. On small motion, you get great roll and action out of it. It's a killer bait. It's a bait that you need to be really careful when you change hooks on it because the balance with this particular bait is critical. Balance is everything with that Megabass. So if you put on too large of a hook, you screw up the action very, very easily. But if you match your hooks appropriately, that bait, I mean, coast to coast, top to bottom, fish catcher. And those baits that will give you a true suspend, that's why you're paying more money, especially in the cold water months. Those really good paint jobs, the baits that are truly balanced, that get really good action on small movement, those baits shine in that cold water in the wintertime, now through, say, February, where you're just rip, 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 and you just leave it. If you rip, 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 and then that bait floats back to the surface, or stands on its nose and sinks to the bottom, the fish aren't going to pursue that. But if you rip, kill it, and it just sits there, and then you rip, and it just sits there, and the fish is looking at it. The next time it moves, they're on it. You've seen that in our underwater jerkbait videos, the way they come up and they stage on that bait, and then the next motion, they go for it. So it's critical to have a bait like this, or a Stacey 90, a bait that will just hang in the water column perfectly in that cold water. Now, I did mention being careful with hook upgrades, but hook upgrades are critical with jerkbaits. So again, down in the video description, we're going to link you to the hooks that we use on jerkbaits. It's really important that you get them dialed. That Aaron Martin's, I think it's called a Finesse Nano Treble. It's a long name, but it's a Gamakatsu hook. That is my favorite jerkbait replacement hook. And then the Megabass, the out barb hooks, I use those a lot too. There are a couple of hooks that we use, but it's really critical that you use the right hook for the job. Two others. One is going to be that pointer, or excuse me, the flash pointer, the 100 and the 115. They also make a 110 size, that same size as the Megabass. I don't throw it as much as the 100 and the 115, but they are just killers. In fact, both of those have those nano trebles on them. These baits have been mangled. Such good baits. Action-wise, these fish just like that vision. Great roll. They're very narrow in the belly and wide on top. It's kind of a unique shape, and it gets really good roll. So when you rip it, not only is it kicking, but it's rocking, and that gives you a lot of flash. In addition to just movement, you get good flash. Now this is a ghost color, so you're not going to see flash there, but in the brighter colors, it'll really throw sunlight as it's rolling through the water. Really, really good option. And then last but not least is my favorite jerkbait. And I'll tell you, a year ago, I didn't even know this bait existed. We've done jerkbait videos before. This bait was not one of them. This is the Jackal Re-Range in a 110 and a 130. We threw this 110 a ton this year. That has become my hands down favorite jerkbait. Incredible amount of flash and roll. Throws a ton of light, even on gentle rips. Tons of light coming off that bait. But it has very aggressive movement. So even on a small pull, it's really going to dart and roll. When that water gets truly, truly cold, I'm talking, 38-degree water, 40-degree water, I'm leaning away from the Re-Range because it has so much movement. But as soon as those temps start to come back up, it's my favorite bait. Works incredibly in the spring, works incredibly in the fall. It works all the time. And then we just started throwing the bigger sizes, the 130. We saw it, but we didn't start throwing it right away. We were so hooked on that 110. But we got our hands on the 130, and it's the exact same action. It's just a bigger profile. It's going to play up there with like the Pointer 128 or the Megabass Kanata. It's in that larger size profile. But again, even though it's a 130, you can see it there next to a 110. It's not that much bigger, and it fishes so, so well. This bait has a unique transfer system in it, so you do have to get used to that, because when you go to cast it, there's a transfer weight. Most jerkbaits have them, so when you go to cast, the weight goes to the back of the bait, so they cast really well and they don't tumble. This one, it's magnetized, so when you cast, it makes this clunk sound. I swear it sounds like you broke your jerkbait off on every cast. Clunk. You got to get used to that. It doesn't matter. It doesn't do anything. But the sound, every time it happens, you're like, what was that? Once you're used to that, it's such a good bait. That Re-Range is one that you need to take a look at. But all of these are. There's so many jerkbaits on the market. These are the baits that came out of my personal box. These are what I fish with. I don't care where you are in the country. I threw this one all week last week in Tennessee and Kentucky. It doesn't matter where you are in the country. These baits are proven. They fish well. I'm sure there are 10 other really good baits on the market, but I'm not confident in telling you that. These are the ones that I'm saying, if you're going to put the time into throwing a jerkbait, I know for sure these are going to work. Color schemes, keep it really, really simple. You want something in that ghost pattern. So if you're in Lucky Craft, that might be Ghost Minnow. If you're in Megabass, they have so many colors. But you want just a ghost profile, one that you can see through. That's typically our cold water color. The clearer, the better. As that water warms up, or you start getting some color to it in the springtime, maybe you're starting to get water influxing into the lake, we'll go to something more in that chartreuse / white category. So chartreuse shad, something with a chartreuse belly on it, something that's just straight white. Those colors that just have a little more presence to them. And then last is going to be something with some chrome. So like that one is true chrome, that re-range. Stacey 90, there's just chrome underneath other colors. Any of the American Shad would be a really good example of one that's got a lot of flash to it. Those are baits that are just going to throw a lot of light. So I fish them a little differently than you might expect. You know, most people will throw a ghost color during high sun so that the fish don't see it as well. And I do too, but I'm not afraid to throw that chrome color in high sun, especially with the re-range or that flash pointer, like the flash pointer 115. If you've got a bait that's really throwing light, and those are the baits that dart and roll a lot, so they throw the most light, it's incredible how far a fish is willing to come to a bait that when it's rolling and kicking, it's just shining light everywhere. They'll come twice as far to eat that bait as they will to a ghost bait. So if you're on a good jerkbait bite, if you're throwing ghost minnow and you're just catching fish on every 4th or 5th cast, don't be afraid to go to that chrome color and see if you can't even step it up farther than that. Get fish to come from farther away to commit to that bait. You might start catching more fish and you might start catching bigger fish. So again, guys, down in the video description, we'll give you links to the rods and the reels that we use, to the hooks that we use to replace on these baits, because the hooks are so key, more so with a jerkbait than any other bait that we throw. And the reason is that when you work that jerkbait, you leave slack. And that's critical too. Actually, I'm going to backpedal a little and talk about that. When I work a jerkbait, the most important thing, especially in cold water, is that the bait goes from sharp movement to dead still, back to sharp movement. The biggest mistake I see people make is that when they go to pull a jerkbait, they reel up the slack first. So what happens, that bait darts and it sits there and it's just suspended in the water column. And then that guy's reeling up his slack for his next motion and he reels up too much and this happens and then it darts again. We've watched enough of that underwater footage. You've watched enough of the underwater footage that we've put out there. If that jerkbait starts to swim before it darts, the fish have zero interest in it. They just turn away because it's not natural. That darting, that erratic, is what gets those bites. So it's really important when you work that bait, when you reel up your extra and you're about to hit that bait again, it's important that you stop short of picking up all your slack. I leave about 2 feet of slack in the line, then I rip through the slack to dart the bait. That way I don't accidentally bump the bait into moving. So with all that said, I'm fishing that bait truly on slack line. Rip, rip, and then I just lay that slack down. Then reel up 90% of it, and then rip, rip, rip. Because it's on slack line, when the fish come up and they eat that bait, they're going to eat it, feel that it's not real, and then try and blow it back out. And because it's slack, that can happen much more quickly than you can catch up and hook them. Sometimes you don't even know that it's happened. They eat it and they spit it out, and you're still sitting there with a slack line, you don't know the difference. So more than any other bait, having a sharp hook on a jerkbait, a bait where they come up and they eat it and they go to spit it out and it won't come out. That's, if you're throwing a jerkbait and you're rip, rip, and you wait, rip, and you wait, and all of a sudden your line just jerks and just starts running, that's what's happened. The fish ate it, hook themselves, and then they run for it, and that's when that line snaps tight. That's a fish that's already hooked itself. So when you put the right hook on there, sticky, sharp hooks, they will stick themselves 9 times out of 10. Your hookup ratio is going to go through the roof. So again, we'll link that down in the description for you. I think we're going to stop right there. Those are the baits that Tim and I throw year-round. Cold months, it's most critical. The rest of the year, you can experiment and try other baits. But those baits, unfortunately, some of them are higher dollar baits, but you get something for that. You get that true suspension in the water column, and you get that great rock and action out of the baits. It makes a big difference in cold water. So there you have it, guys. 5 or 6 different baits that you can throw this winter into next spring. We're doing these buyer's guides for you. This is for you so you know what baits to buy. This is so your loved ones know which baits to get for you. With the holidays coming, feel free to share this link with them. But if you enjoyed it, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and of course, if there are other buyer's guides that you would like, down there in the comments, let us know about it. Have a good one.